Happy holidays, folks. I hope you're having a great one. The holidays are pretty often a time to celebrate family and friends, you know? So what better way than to release this very delayed 300 subscriber special? Maybe my New Year's resolution this year will be to release videos on time. Who knows, anything can happen. Homemade trading card games are great. I mean, they aren't perfect, no game is, but the imperfection each different game has reflects the creator. The art styles, the font choices, the templates, the gameplay, the inspirations, they all create the entire image of a game. So for today's video, I kind of want to ramble about my own progression as a creator, about the community and a few games I own, and a few other things, so get cozy and enjoy. Alright, so this first section will be about my own games. If you want to skip to community stuff, there'll be timestamps in the description. So in front of me are cards from a few of the games I've worked on over the years, including a few I haven't showed off on the channel. These two on the left are a game called Duality and a game whose name I've kind of forgot, but if I remember correctly, it was called Congress of Champions. The middle one is of course Easterbourne, and the last two are the beta and released versions of Astronomica. It's always fun to take a look back at your old projects, see how they inspire you, what carried forward, what you dropped, and how you've improved. Both Duality and Congress were made in Microsoft Word with images I filtered off of Google, which is why I don't really mention them often. Easterbourne, Astronomica, those are all drawn by me. Easterbourne was made in Corel Painter, and Astronomica was made in Affinity Designer, mainly. Now, Duality was a game I made around the beginning of high school. It was my take on bringing a MOBA-styled gameplay in card form. I was obsessed with Dota 2 in high school. I mean, I would spend 8 hours every day on a weekend grinding the game, and I was terrible at it, bro. Terrible. But anyway, you might think that those stats might be attack or health like you would see in other games, but it was actually a respawn timer. When a unit was destroyed, you'd have to wait a set amount of turns to revive the character, and when the character was dead, that column was defenseless and your opponent's champions could attack directly, and you controlled 5 in a row. It was a unique game, but it took way too long to play. Without a lot of draw power, the game went by rather slow, since in order to kill your opponent's champions, you usually had to stack the extra cards to make plays. So I incorporated and learned from that in my later games. Next up was Congress of Champions, which is pretty much a Kaijudo or Magic clone. There's 5 factions, and you could use any card in your hand like a land, which you might see in games like Dragon Ball Super or Kaijudo. This game was probably my least original, and looking back, it wasn't the greatest. It was pretty much just Magic 2, so it's probably best to just move on. After that was Easterbourne, which most of you might be familiar with because that video about it is one of my most watched. You can check it out in the cards up there if you haven't seen it. Easterbourne was the first time I tried to draw my own cards to varying results, but yeah, I was pretty happy with the game. Easterbourne was around the time I adopted my new design philosophy, which was basing games around a unique gimmick but not trying to reinvent the wheel. For Easterbourne, that gimmick was a life bar, which was also your deck, a resource deck, and it also worked as a comeback mechanic. It honestly kind of worked pretty well, but I burned out. Well, that's one of the game's main issues. I was aiming for 208 cards in the first set, which is pretty ambitious, you know? I had 8 elements, 208 cards in the first set. It didn't really work. And as you saw in the video, even in later versions, I just couldn't really get myself on board to finish it, you know? So here's a tip. Don't make sets bigger than what you could realistically make in a year, or else your second set may take way too long to get out after your first. It can also make you suffer from burnout faster, from doing so much work and seeing no response to it, you know? Now the last 2 piles here are both the original and the current version of Astronomica. I thought it'd be cool to show you some of the work in progress art, like on these super rares, or some of the things that changed, like the card back and the variant and the gradient on the Kikitos cards. These cards have a very vibrant card back. It was supposed to represent the 3 factions in a game at the time, but I eventually realized I might want to add more in the future, and I dropped the gimmick there. Here's another tip, I guess. Don't limit your design space with random assets like your card backs, right? I mean, if your card back is preventing you from adding factions because of consistency, it's kind of cringe. Now that wraps up my personal stroll down memory lane, but I also want to talk a bit about what I've seen in games in the community. Now there are a lot of games in the community, and if you've been around as long as I have, you've seen them come and go. It's kind of great in a way, that the nature of a creator-driven community like this one lets you see so many crazy ideas you can't get from a boardroom. I mean, look at the spread of cards I have in front of me. They're all pretty different. I sometimes group games up in my head based on where I think their inspirations were. I don't think it's a bad thing, but I think most people, myself included, base their games on a certain one and then tries to improve mechanics in there to fit more of what they look for in a card game. You have games like Chaos Galaxy, Dream Dimension, Oversoul, Danhan Rhapsody, and Monstercraft, which I feel like take more from Japanese games like Vanguard or Yu-Gi-Oh! Or you have games like Rune, Afro Chibi, Fusion Tale, Wrath of Kors, Ashram Cross, which I feel like take a bit more from like Magic the Gathering or more Western card games like Pokemon. Well, Pokemon's Japanese, right? Of course, there are always the wild card games, those like Runiverse and Combo Masters, which feel very different and original, you know. Combo Masters is less of a creature battler and is more of a combo battler, as implied by the game's name. And Runiverse, I feel like, has a lot of very fresh takes on ways to play cards and mechanics like that. I do think the best games are really those that can work and carve out their own personal niche, you know. It's hard to really convince a Magic player to swap over to your game, which is basically Magic 2, if your game doesn't really have the same amount of cards or install base. But if it's anything unique and original, you can definitely steal a few players who play more casually. To be fair though, this is coming from a guy who basically made Magic 2, and I do want to say that when you're designing your own homemade trading card game, it's a hobby, so always do whatever you want to do. I am not some kind of master of homemade TCG game design, you know? You gotta figure out what you want to do for yourself. But what is the point of this video? The thesis, or the central idea? Well, the answer is pretty much nothing but me showing off a bunch of cards I've bought. I just want an excuse to show off a bunch of random cards. But basically, I think this is a great community of artists and game designers, and I guess all I'm saying is I wouldn't have it any other way. Happy New Year's, folks. Let's hope the community continues to grow well into 2021. If you want to see more detail on any of these games, I do have a playlist of pack openings for these, and I'll link them in the description and at the end of the video. And as always, you can like and subscribe for more homemade trading card game videos, and links to Astronomica on the Game Crafter will be below. And I hope to see you in the next video. Stay wavy.